In this video, we're going to talk about hubs. And before we get into all the details of what a hub is and how it works, the first thing I want to tell you is that we don't use hubs anymore and we replace them by switches. However, we have to understand why we don't use hubs. And for those of you that go and you decide to work in the IT world, if you go and you are desktop support or if you're a network support, you may encounter hubs in use, or you may encounter them just sitting in storage. And if you don't know the difference, if you don't look at the details, a hub looks just like a switch. And you may end up accidentally putting a hub in use when you shouldn't be using a hub. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's talk about hubs. So like I said, we don't use hubs anymore. We used to use them a long time ago. They were used in early networks, but we now replace them with switches, and we'll talk about that in the next lecture. So we don't use them because they're inefficient and they are what we consider a multi-port repeater. So what do I mean by multi-port repeater? Well, when traffic goes into one port, one physical port on this hub, it is repeated, meaning it's sent out on every other single port. So for example, if we have computer 1 here and it wants to communicate with computer 2, if it tries to send data out its port and it wants to get it to computer 2, the hub is what we call a dumb network device. It doesn't try to memorize anything at all. It doesn't know where that data is supposed to go. Instead, it really doesn't care. What it does is instead, anywhere where there's a network cable plugged in, it sends that data out onto every single port. And so computer 3 over here is going to get that data, and computer 4 is going to get that data as well. And what that ends up doing is that it makes the network very congested, so you're going to have lots of packets of data going across. So if you imagine computer 1 needs to communicate with computer 2, computer 2 at the same time is trying to communicate with computer 3, and computer 3 is trying to communicate with computer 4. Every time each device is trying to send data out their port, this hub is taking that data and it's sending out every other single port. And so what we have is that we have data just going everywhere onto every single port. And in the networking world, we call this one big collision domain, because when we have this happening, we have to have safeguards in place to prevent data from hitting each other while they're on the wire. And so we have packets of information going back and forth. The last thing we want is for them to collide and have a collision where that data is lost. And so it makes it very inefficient, it makes it very slow, and there's also a security concern. If computer 1 has information that it only wants going to here, where potentially it has sensitive information, well, if you have a hacker listening on the network over here, maybe tapped into this network wire, when this data comes out here, then the hacker can get it. And so with all that said, the big takeaway is that a hub is much less efficient than a switch, and we'll talk about why that's so. And just be aware that you are going to encounter these from time to time if you ever work in the IT world. So that's what a hub is. That's our quick introduction. In the next lecture, we're going to take a look at switches, and after that, we're going to compare hubs to switches, and you'll really get an idea of why switches are so much better than hubs.